Hello and welcome back to another episode of Untold Chapters with Austin Macauley Publishers. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest, new author Penelope Alice. Penelope has recently published her first book with us, Soulfire, on May 24th, 2024. Raised in Buckinghamshire, Penelope Alice is a software engineer and spends many happy hours walking in the countryside and visiting the local attractions. From a young age, Penelope has wanted to be a writer as she enjoys nothing more than building fantastical worlds and stories. Thank you for attending one of our Untold Chapter episodes. Would you like to introduce yourself for our viewers?
Hiya, I am Penelope Alice and I have written a book, which is why I'm here. My book is called Soulfire and it is a fantasy book set in a completely different world to our own, which is always good fun, isn't it? It's about a girl who is exiting the expected norms of her society and becoming a warrior. There is magic, there is monsters, creatures, which are both dangerous, formidable, to keep some excitement in the story. And I've had a lot of fun creating the rules to define how my world is run. Little bit about me, I am autistic, so I use writing as a way to express myself, as I tend to find it quite hard to communicate with people, but when I'm writing it is, well, I guess a bit of a release and I'm not quite so worried anymore.
So what was the inspiration for the book?
I wrote it during COVID, so sort of thinking of old holidays. So when I initially started writing the book, it was all meant to be sort of these people sat around a fire just telling stories and having a bit of a campfire story type thing. So it's only meant to be a short story. And then as I sort of wrote the opening scenes, I was like, oh, and suddenly this sort of world exploded in my head. Whilst it was initially inspired by sort of girl guiding campfire stories, when I started writing the first story that was being told around this campfire, ended up going in a completely and utterly different direction, and it turned itself into a series. I was like, right, this story is going to actually be, I changed the location from sort of just a like a farming community to an icy landscape, which was actually inspired by Ice Age 2: The Meltdown, because I like ice. I find it quite calming, being the big blank white expanses, which is why the story is set where it is. So I just wanted to write more a story of people not necessarily being confined to the roles that they were originally expected to be within. The design of my characters I also based on Yoda and Dobby, because I just thought it'd be really funny to have people wandering around with big floppy ears.
Okay, that's adorable. So when you were first writing it, what was the target audience you had in mind for it?
I wanted to write a book that I would enjoy. So it's sort of at the time I read a lot of YA fantasies, so age 14 and up, which I think still very much fits with where the book is targeted at. And I still enjoy reading this style of book, which is why I wrote it. But personally, I think anyone would enjoy it. I don't think it is particularly confined to specifically, oh, only teenagers will enjoy this. I think women probably would enjoy it more than men. Know people right up into their 50s and 60s that have been reading my story and enjoying it. Mostly targeted at young adults, but anyone, really. Not younger people. I think some of the tones of the story would be too dark for sort of your primary school reading.
You wanted to write a fantasy book from the very beginning.
Yes, I really, really like writing fantasy because I'm a great fan of escapism. I like to not be here where I can.
Understandable.
I didn't want to be confined by the rules of our world and our society, and I find it fun to sort of imagine what would happen if like the sky was green, or if physics doesn't work in the same way. Just explore different ways that a world could work, or like even within a society, like what would happen if gender norms are extreme, or what if they don't exist at all, that sort of thing. I've also spent my entire life trying to act neurotypical, which is fun. So when I write, I like to explore the ways that people interact with each other, but also sort of how would people change depending, like if the societal rules of the typical way of behaving was actually completely different.
Because I'm an avid fantasy book reader myself, so anything that just gets me out of reality pretty much is just an immediate winner in my book. Weirdly enough, I started reading, I think it was Fourth Wing and then into ACOTAR, and then it sort of
Oh, yeah.
technically went downhill from there for me, and then into the realm I go.
Well, it's not a poor realm you've delved yourself into.
Oh, absolutely not. It's brilliant there. I'd definitely recommend.
I've read all of them, so
Well, I'm guessing you've read Throne of Glass as well.
I've actually only read the first book of Throne of Glass. I've been reading the Crescent City.
Oh,
Throne
that's
of
a good
Glass was my
choice.
sister's series, so I wanted to not read the same books as my sister. So I have them all, and I am preparing to read them. I'm just currently working my way through sort of Pride and Prejudice at the moment.
Nice choice. There's definitely, yeah, it's always a classic for me that absolutely love Pride and Prejudice. If you like Crescent City, because so far I've only read the first one, and so far I'm absolutely falling in love with it. But
It's great.
I definitely really do recommend Throne of Glass. You'll love it if you love escapism. Yeah,
Yeah.
main character of Throne of Glass is by far my favorite of all
Oh.
time, pretty much. So I know that you said that you were, writing during COVID, but like as you were writing, did you experience any challenges or things that sort of caused you a bump along the way?
Well, of course, writing's actually really, really, really hard work, which I suspect a lot of people would understand and probably expect. So I struggle with focus. My mind travels slightly faster than I can write or speak, and it takes random flights of fancy all the time. So I really struggled to write my book in a way that kept it all in the right order. So I've written bits of like book 3 in my series before I'd finished writing half of book 1. I really struggled to keep it all together, to get it all in a concise sort of chronological start to finish, to keep it all so it makes sense and avoid plot holes. Yeah, so when I first finished writing my first draft, I found that I'd been referring or skipping to bits that was less good. Whilst I was at school, regularly got told I'm not very good at writing. So I've been told I'm not very good at describing stuff. I'm not very good. Yeah, I really struggled with. I could do the whole analysis and the very formal writing. I wasn't very good at doing more expressive story writing through school. So it was always my worst grades, but it was what I enjoyed doing the most. So it's meant that now that I've written a story, I do have a bit of imposter syndrome, and I am sure my book is not as good as people tell me it is. So it has actually been really hard to believe in myself. It was my family that pushed me to get my book published because I didn't think it was good enough.
Yeah. Oh, because that's the thing, like I've always believed this because I sort of write stories on the side as well. And I've always believed that I am my own worst critic. I will forever remain in that position. But like the way that you've done it as well, because when it comes to stories, it's a really good way of sort of, you've got a story, which is great, but like you can have like puzzle pieces and then you can just fit them all together, see what works, see what doesn't. That's the brilliant thing about writing, is that
Yeah.
nothing's ever really set in stone. You can go back, you can edit it as many times as you want, and you can evolve over time.
Yeah.
So
No, it's
honestly, hats off to you for having the courage, even if it is with sort of your family saying, go on, you can do it, you can do
you do
it.
it, you do it. Yeah.
It's like,
No,
oh, just
it's
basically just push into the deep end.
yeah. The push I had was for the year I finished writing it. My granddad actually paid a self like he paid to have about 5 or 6 copies of the book printed. So I have a few very like with the initial copy that I ended up submitting to Austin Macauley, I have actually printed as a physical book. And I know my granddad and granny were like lending it round to their friends, and they were all being like, oh, this is actually really good. And one of them sent me a letter going, when's the next book coming? So I thought, okay, I need to keep writing.
That is the ultimate recommendation, honestly. Just, when is the next book coming out? Someone's, read it and is eagerly awaiting the sequel and go on from there. Because I know with, like you were saying, with just writing in general, it is incredibly difficult, and especially with writer's block and things like that. But do you
That's been a
have...
big suffering of book two. I
Hmm.
think I've rewritten the first half of book two at least 4 times because I haven't been happy with how I've been beginning it because writer's block has been insane.
Yeah, it's never an easy thing, writer's block, to get over as well. Do you have any tips or tricks that you tend to work through yourself, to just, in general, to, I don't know, anyone who might be writing their own book, or in the process of writing their own book, or anything of the sort?
So the first thing I've done is I've actually written a sort of just a very broad overarching, this is where the book is beginning, this is where it's going to end, just so I can sort of keep on track of what I want my book to be doing. And I found that was like with book one, it was really helpful because it meant I could reorder what I'd written to actually get it to make sense. It helped me get rid of all the plot holes. It made sure, well, I'm sure there probably are plot holes, but at the moment, I don't know of any. But it helped tie the story in together, and it means just having that written up of this is where the book's beginning, this is where it's going to end. And even I've got sort of, I know how the whole series is going to end, and I know specific bits that are going to happen in book two or book three. So just having that has meant that in book one, I've managed to, within book one, there's bits that tie to different areas of the story together, but there are also bits that from book one tie the whole way through to book two and book three.
Mhm.
So just, even if it's not a particularly detailed, just having a very brief outline of this is what I want my story to do, even if it's just my story will cover this. This is the theme my story is going to be. I've got notebooks that I keep sort of when I come up with a character, even if that character doesn't end up in the final book, I have notes of what that character is like,
Hmm.
so that when I'm writing them, I have a sort of blueprint of this is how this character would react because this character is a generically cheerful person. So it just makes sure that the characters I write tend to be consistent rather than having huge personality swaps.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is that anyone trying to write a story needs to believe in themselves, believe that they can do it, even if it takes them years and years and years to write the story from start to finish. The feeling of pride you get when you actually finish at least your first draft is amazing. Looking back at what you've written, thinking, oh my goodness, I actually got that written. You just need to believe you can do it because you can.
Thank you for listening to our newest episode of Untold Chapters. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. There will be links in the description to purchase your copy of Soulfire.